Hello, Adventrial TCG here. This video is the start of a world building series on my channel where I draw out and narrate the lore of Adventrial, the setting of a trading card game that I'm designing. This series is a way of capturing my thought process and giving players another vehicle to explore the characters and locations displayed in my game. I will be narrating my creative process and giving insight into how lore affects my game mechanics and general world framework. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around and enjoy world building with me. The first character race that I decided to create in Adventrial are Goblins. Now I know they might not be the most exciting place to start when it comes to characters that might appear in your world, but I wanted to take a bottom-up approach. In my world, I want Goblins to be one of the lower ranking races in terms of influence, and because of this, I figured they would be a good starting point. Before I continue, I think that it's important to give some context to the overall narrative that I'm trying to create for my game. Like many other TCGs, my game has different types of cards that are categorized by a multicolored resource system. This is similar to how Magic the Gathering's mana system and Pokemon's typing system categorize cards based on the faction they belong to. Similarly, my game has 6 different colors that reflect 6 different playstyles available to players. I'm still brainstorming how I want these different factions to be represented in Adventrial. They could be different forms of magic that are used, different chakra natures, or even 6 different elemental constructs. One thing I do know though, is that I want my first set release to include a map detailing 6 different regions, showing where the different colored factions are located. For example, red cards included in the first set would be characters, locations, and events that would appear somewhere within the red region map. So this is where I began on my design journey. I knew that these goblins would be going in the red starter deck I created for the red faction. Therefore, these little green monsters had to match up with the aggressive and fast-paced playstyle the deck was designed around. To gain some design inspiration, I looked at other games that included goblins, and noticed that most video games introduce these creatures as early game fodder used for players to level up. Oftentimes, an individual goblin here and there didn't pose much of a threat to players. However, when these mobs were in groups, they could prove to be quite the nuisance. I thought it would be interesting to parallel this narrative found in video games by making individual goblins in Adventrial fairly weak in combat. On their own, these creatures wouldn't be much of a threat, but when they acted in unison, goblins could be capable of taking down a single powerful opponent through underhanded means such as traps or trickery. Next, I established how goblins would act alongside other groups in nearby territories. I decided that goblins in the red region would adopt a tribal village system, where a chieftain-like figurehead would rule over others in the community. These goblins would be selfish in nature because of the extremely competitive societal structure of the tribes they live in. The only way to move up in these communities would be to make those above you fall from power. All the better if this is because of foul play. This constant competition and power struggle within goblin society proves it almost impossible to advance constructs such as agriculture, diplomacy, or even culture. Food and supplies are much more easily stolen from wandering travelers or merchants than worked for through honorable means. Tribes will often set up traps or ambushes on unguarded pathways in hopes of finding easy prey. I thought it would be interesting to build upon this idea of survival through looting by making goblin tribes nomadic in nature. They would rotate through different areas within a region, moving when word spread of their thievery and once traveled roads dried up. In order to support their nomadic lifestyles, goblins became adept beast tamers to caravan supplies across long distances. In the red region, they tame wargulls, large boar-like beasts that are rugged enough to migrate across harsh deserts and barren plains. The next thing I needed to figure out is how goblins would interact with nearby cities and townships. For this, I took inspiration from the Jawas in Star Wars. As goblin tribes migrate about stealing from travelers, they could attempt to sell unwanted goods at discounted prices in hopes of gaining money for food, weapons, and other miscellaneous supplies. Similar to how the Jawas would wander around the desert in large transports selling refurbished droids to nearby settlements. The last aspect of goblin society I designed was their religion, but I didn't exactly design anything here because I really liked the D&D version, so I just adapted that. See, in D&D, goblins have only one god, Maglubiet, the god of war and leadership who ruled over goblinoid deities with an iron fist, before killing them all to take control of goblinoid souls and wage eternal warfare in his sacred realm. See, when goblins die, they are summoned as soldiers to fight in his eternal war. I figured this religious perspective would be an excellent way of justifying why goblins in Adventrial are tribal in nature and so competitive with each other. They are terrified of dying and being forced to battle eternally, so they will do anything to give themselves the best chance of survival, even if it means selling out other members of their tribe. With all this in mind, I was able to create mechanics for the goblins in my red starter deck. I created an entrapment based card that can be set ahead of time, dealing damage to enemies when they enter the battlefield. I also created multiple unit cards with an effect called Tag Team that boosts goblins' attacks when they are close in proximity to each other, focusing on their strength in numbers. Lastly, I created a draw-based effect that triggers when an attack is successful. This is designed around how goblins loot for supplies. With this lore framework in mind, I can continue to design goblin-adjacent cards that align both mechanically and flavorfully for my game. Some things will most likely change along the way as I continue to flesh out the world of Adventrial, but as of now, I'm pretty happy with what I've created. With respect to lore and mechanics, I hope that this layered complexity will grant players a multitude of different angles to enjoy my game from, in turn, increasing immersion and overall enjoyment. I'll continue to adopt this design philosophy for all things that I create within the world of Adventrial, so that I can create the best trading card game experience I can for my players. If you'd like to see more world building videos on my channel, please consider subscribing. And if you have any ideas about what things I should put in my world, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll see you guys in the next video when we add another piece to my world building puzzle. Thanks for watching.